Hey everybody! Today we're going to make something that is goat related, but it's not cheese. Today, you're in for a sweet treat. Goat milk caramels. As you know, we're still dry. We got about a month to go until kidding here, but fortunately, if you go back to our cream separation video, you'll know that I froze a lot of goat cream back in the fall. So we're going to use our goat cream for this video, and we're also going to use this recipe. I found it before Christmas. It's actually from King Arthur Flour. I'll post this down in the description of the recipe. I don't know why a flour company would post a recipe for something that has no flour in it, but it turned out great and I'm happy that they did. So let's get started. You're going to need a heavy bottomed pot. I'm using a 3-quart pot, and this is going to take about 2 hours to cook everything down. So be sure that you're prepared to sit and stir for a long time before you get started on this. Before I did anything else, I took 2½ tablespoons of vanilla and set that aside. We're going to use that last. I'm not using goat butter for this. Goat butter is hard to make. You saw how long it took to separate all that cream. Now imagine separating all that cream, then churning all that cream, then getting all the way out. I'll make a video for that some other time, but I'm just using store-bought butter for this. So I'm going to use, I've got a big bread pan and an 8x8 pan, and I'm just going to take these sticks of butter and really grease these pans well, because we're pouring the hot caramel in here after we've cooked it down, and it will stick and be hard to get out if you don't grease this well. Now it's time to add everything else to this pan. First, so it melts a little more evenly, I'm just going to chunk up this butter. You want a pound of butter. That's a whole box, 4 sticks. Nobody said this was good for you. A quart of half and half. And I've got this quart of goat cream that I took out of the freezer, and I think it might have a little ice left in the middle, but it's mostly thawed. So I'm going to use that. It's not quite a quart, so yeah, it's got a couple little ice crystals still in there. So I did defrost another one. I can add a little more. Yep, still got some ice crystals. Yeah, it looks like about a quart. Okay, now we need 2 cups of light corn syrup, which it says 16 fluid ounces or 1 pint. So that's just 1 bottle of it, the whole thing. I'm going to turn the heat on low and get it started while we finish up measuring out our sugars. Okay, I had a blonde moment and just realized what pot I actually used. It was the bigger one, because as I'm adding this stuff, it's getting way close to the top. So I'm going to switch out. My 3-quart for this one is a 6-quart. I think this is going to be a little easier. Bear with me, it's the second time I've ever done this. Alright. No harm, no foul. Now we've got 4 cups of granulated sugar. 1, 2, 3, 4. Definitely a good thing I used the bigger pot. And 2 cups of light brown sugar. I wonder if it's exactly 2 cups in one of these packages. I guess we're about to find out, huh? 2. Looks like it, doesn't it, Chase? That would be silly. We'll know for the future if it is. 3. Pretty darn close. Look at that. Like the rest of this is almost hardly worth putting back, but we'll be good. Alrighty, let's 2 teaspoons of salt, and I'm going to point out here that I use salted butter. And I use the salt because I'm a huge believer that sweets aren't worth eating unless they've got enough salt in them. So instead of unsalted butter, salted butter, and then also use 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm going to add the rest of the corn syrup that was stuck on the edge. I left it upside down for a minute. And on medium heat, I'm going to stir all this up. and we are going to cook it for a long time. You actually are going to need a thermometer, and I just use the Chef Alarm thermometer that I use for my cheese. A lot said to use a candy thermometer, but this seemed to work okay. I'll give you some tips when I get closer to where we're headed with this. It says to go up to about 248 degrees Fahrenheit, and when you get up to close to 240, 235, 240, the temperatures start rising a lot higher, because at that point you've evaporated off most of your liquid in here, and that's when it's actually starting to turn into candy. So when you get to that point, you've really got to watch it more carefully and keep checking that temperature. But it's going to take a long time to get there. So first, we're just going to stir and get all this hot and melted. The butter is all melted now, and I'm just waiting for it to come to a boil. We want to keep it at a gentle boil until it gets to temperature. So right now we're at 182 degrees. So we've got probably another 20 degrees or so before it's going to boil for us. And then we just need to keep it boiling until the temperature starts to rise up to where we need it to be. I've been stirring this about 15 minutes now. It's at 100 and, well, this is on the bottom. It's one thing with the thermometer. Make sure it's not sitting on the bottom of the pan to get an accurate reading. So it's about 121 degrees. And Chase is choking back in the background. But it's okay. He's good. So we're just going to keep going. I mean, the point of this is, water has got a boiling point of about 112. So it's going to be a little different with all the other stuff in here. So it looks like this has got a boiling point of about 121. And you got to boil all that water out of this, and then the sugar will start to heat up hotter. So that's our goal. We'll check back in about 20 minutes. It's been about 20 minutes, and you can see how much this is cooked down now. It's starting to get thicker. It's starting to smell like caramel. When I pull the thermometer off the bottom, it shows 223, 224 degrees. So a lot of this water's starting to cook out. So we're going to keep on going, and we'll be back in about 20 minutes to give you an update. Another 20 minutes passed, and you see the bubbles are starting to get a little thicker. It's starting to get a little glossier. We're at 125 degrees now, and it's just a matter of keep on stirring. So we'll be back in another 20 minutes, or when we get to about 140 degrees, whichever comes first. This is at about 140 degrees now, and you see when I take the temperature, I've got to hold the probe up off the bottom of the pot, and as this gets thicker with all these bubbles in it, the temperature will want to fluctuate a little bit. And so last time I did this, every once in a while it would go up to about 152, and then I have to stir it down to 148. But you don't want caramels that are going to take your fillings out of your teeth. You also don't want them really soft, or they're not going to hold together. So you kind of got to find that happy medium there. And it's going to be about 148, but until then, you're going to have to test it every now and then. So I just got a plate, and I'll just dribble a little bit on a plate to cool, and then set it aside and keep testing the consistency of it when it cools to see if it's getting where we want it to be. So we're getting real close, 140 degrees. So I'm going to keep going. We're about 8 to 10 degrees away, but as you get to this point, it gets a lot faster. So just really keep an eye on it. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, this when I stir it down is saying 243 now. I'll tell you what, I'm getting tired of stirring. You can see how thick it's getting. So I put some on this plate, and what we want, it's not cool yet on the plate, but we want it to where it's going to set up to where it's going to hold its form at room temperature. So I also took a bit of it and I put it into this bowl of cool water. Not mean to drip that in there. And I want to feel the consistency of it. So if you look, it's almost getting where we want it. So I want to do it a little higher because I want to get at least at 140, but it's getting close. But it's very important here. Yeah, so I ate that. It's important here that you don't let it go too much, or you're going to have really hard caramel. So keep testing it until you feel like it's where you want it to be. But again, like I said, we're still stirring down to 244 here. So I'm going to keep on going for a while, so at least I stir down to 248. Okay, so it's going up in places. This is where I got to the end of last time I made this. But places it's wanting to go up to like 157, way up in there. So we're getting really close, but then if I stir it down and stir it down and stir it down, I can still stir it down underneath that 148. Like right now I've just stirred it down to 146, but now it's right back up to 149. So we're really in the decide point. Like, is this ready, is it not? And like I said, you don't want to overdo it. So I'm just going to keep testing it. So I'm going to put another little bit on this plate, let this cool. Just throw another little bit into this bowl to cool it fast and come out and see what the texture is. Meanwhile, I'm going to keep stirring. So it's going down to, this is where it gets tough because the probe likes to move around, and if it hits the bottom of the pan, it shows it's higher. It's hard to keep the probe right in the middle of the pan. So this is showing about 250, and this is about where I took it off last time. So here's our caramel that I just pulled out, and you see it's still just a tiny bit soft because you want it to be set up when you don't want it to turn into mush inside your wrappers at room temperature. You want it to keep its form. This is the one I just put here. You see it's still hot, but it's starting to keep its form better. We are within, I don't know, within a minute, I think, of pulling this, so stick with me. We'll get it. It's stuck in my teeth. So we're stirring down now to it's showing 250. There's 248. So I just want to make sure that I can't stir it underneath 248, and I don't think I can. So we're going to turn the heat off, and then remember that vanilla that we set aside, pour that in there, and that's going to sizzle and bubble. And that's just because this is over boiling temperature. So really be careful when you're working with it. So stir that in really, really well. You can smell all the alcohol burning off of it when you pour that in there. Whew. I just want to mix that in. And then we've got our pans ready over here. So we're going to pour it in till it's about an inch deep or 3/4 of an inch deep in these pans. And do not scrape the sides of the pan. If you scrape off the sides of the pan, you're going to scrape off the hard bits of the caramel. So again, it's really hot, so be careful doing this. This is hotter than boiling. So I'm going to come over and pour this into my pan. And I might need another pan. And I should have gotten myself another pan, but I didn't. So I think that's about as high as I can put that one. I'll try to get myself another pan real quick because I didn't quite give myself enough room here, I'm afraid. So I don't want to mess that up. He's laughing at me. So I'm working against the clock here, so I'm going to put this and cheat and do it this way. And hopefully that'll still come out. But again, you do not want to scrape this out of the pan. If it doesn't come out, just let it go. Let that dry. I think they called that chef's reward. Scrape that out and we can eat that ourselves. So I've got another little dish here that I'm going to try to scrape the chef's rewards off into for us to snack on later. These handles are probably hot. Nah, not too bad. Because this stuff that's stuck to the side is going to get a lot chewier than the stuff in the middle. Now let those sit at room temperature for 30 minutes to cool down. And then we're going to crack some sea salt on the top of them and put them in the refrigerator to cool overnight. It's been 30 minutes and I've got some sea salt, and I was hoping to get my grinder to get it to get a little more coarse. It's a little finer than I wanted, but I ground it into a bowl because I want to be able to spread it kind of evenly on here, and if I ground it right on there, it wouldn't spread as well. So, because it can't be salty enough, right? I'm gonna just put a dusting of little sea salt crystals on the top of each one, and then throw them in the fridge overnight to cool. We will be back in the morning to show you how to cut out the wrappers for them and to get these things cut and wrapped up. See you tomorrow. Hey everyone, it's the next day. It's time to get these caramels out of the pan, cut them up, and get them wrapped. Now, in the directions it said to wrap them in wax paper, and I didn't actually have any wax paper the day I made them before Christmas, but I did have some of this press and seal wrap, and so I decided to use that, and actually I think it worked out better than wax paper would have. I just pulled a piece off, I cut them into about 4-inch squares, so pull off about a 4-inch length, and then use your scissors to sort of cut that into thirds. Remember, once it's all wrapped up, you don't really see the uneven edges because it all goes in the, wrapped around the candy, you can't tell. So if I were doing a whole bunch of these, I would probably look to buy some pre-formed wrappers because this took an awful lot of time to cut this many pieces of paper to wax them in, but I didn't buy any. So next time I do this, I'm going to buy some pre-formed wrappers. Here's our pan with the cooled caramels from in the refrigerator, and the first thing you're going to have to do is go around the edges to kind of loosen up the edges. And I don't want to scratch up my nonstick pan, so I'm just really carefully going to try to get in there with a knife without scratching it. But it won't come out unless you loosen it. Hopefully we're loose enough. There we go. I'm going to flip them back over and cut these into bite-sized pieces. Now, it's really hard right now because it's been refrigerated, so I might want to wait till it warms up just a tiny bit so it's easier to cut, but you don't want to get it so warm that they just kind of mush when you cut them. You want to be able to make a nice straight cut. So I'm going to set these aside for a little bit, cut out some more of my wrappers, and then I'll come back to cut these up. I have a line of this sliced. It's getting warm enough to kind of get through here. And it's still cold, so it's still going to take a little work to get through, so I'll keep working on that one. But I want to kind of maintain its square edges. So while I was cutting out bits of the press and seal for wrappers, I realized how long that was going to take, so I went on Amazon and I bought some the wax paper squares already pre-cut. So I'll probably just do this one today, and the other pans I'll wait till those come the other tomorrow or the next day. But while I was looking, I came across this and show you. I don't know how this would work. They're like these silicone caramel trays. My only concern is you saw how hard it was to kind of pour it in there. It's not going to go in neatly into each of those holes, so I'm not exactly sure how that would work, but I thought they were interesting. So if you have any ideas on those, give me a shout out in the comments. All right, back to this. So I'm going to cut each one into about a bite-sized piece, and these are homemade products, so I am not going to sweat it if they're each a little different, but I just want each one to be about one bite. Remember, this is going to soften up once it's warm. Even those end ones, you see it was a lot easier. So after you get your bit of caramel, put it in one of your wrappers. And then I wrapped them up on the diagonal and twisted the ends. Just like that. One down. About 300 to go. So wrap on the diagonal. Twist the ends. And then the other ones I stored in the refrigerator, and I would bring out before I'd serve them and let them warm up to room temperature just so we wouldn't break people's teeth on them and they'd be nice and soft. That's about it with that. I've got another hour or so to be wrapping caramels, I guess. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll be back with more videos soon.